Hello there. My name is Jasom Jensai, and welcome to this stream where we're going to be discussing Mandalorian, Chapter 13, the top 10 Force abilities, in my opinion, and your opinion if you want to, and how powerful is Ahsoka Tano. But first, before we get to all that, the question of the stream, which is what planet is the Resistance base located on during The Force Awakens? So, yeah, it's a pretty simple question. Where is the Resistance base like based? The majority of the Resistance, like Leia's there usually. Where do they go? They go right before they go to Starkiller Base. It's where they plan their meeting. What planet is that? Um, yeah. So tell me during the stream. If you want 10 points, so you get one guess. Don't look it up. And what's the other thing? Oh, first person to get it only. So if someone's already gotten it, you don't need to guess. But before we get, or not before we get to that, we just did that. Without further ado, let's just move on to Chapter 13 of The Mandalorian, which was a great episode. Just all around, super cool. It's not my favorite, probably not even my second favorite. Like, right after seeing it, I was like, oh, it's really, really good. But now it's kind of like, oh, yeah, it's good. Yeah. So, I would say it's my third favorite behind Chapter 8 and Chapter 12. Maybe even fourth favorite. I don't know. But I'm just going to start summarizing, like, my thoughts on it. So, the setting is super cool. The, like, forest planet. I'd love to live there, not on the polluted side, but like where it was all green. That'd be great. But yeah. So then, but the side that is polluted is it's not. I wouldn't want to live there, but it looks really cool. Um, so I'm trying to organize my thoughts. Just the fog, the like twisted trees, and then the city itself. Had a very like dirty and Asian. Um, Not that like Asians are dirty, but just those two together. um, it had a very like poor working in a factory type of feel, mixed with like a Asian like samurai Japanese, that kind of Japanese might be the wrong word. I don't know that much about Asian culture, but it's the pop culture Asian. Um, yeah, super cool. It's a very interesting environment to me. I liked the bad guys, like the characters. Their costume designs were super cool. The one like lead guard, he doesn't have a name. Um, he was pretty cool. Nothing super special from the bad guys, but they just looked really cool. Same with the planet. It's just like a cool. It's just a cool thing that they have in Star Wars, which they have a lot of. And we finally learned Baby Yoda's name, Grogu. Super cool. I mean, I don't know how. But like, it's not a like mind blowing name. It's not like. I mean, it is a little surprising considering there's Yoda and Yaddle. They both start with Y, and then Grogu starts with G. So it is a little bit confusing. But I mean, it's not like there was ever a rule. It has to start with Y. So I guess it's a good name. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's like a super good name, but it's just a fine name. And his backstory, which was revealed, he used to live at the Jedi Temple. That explains his power level a little bit. It explains where he came from. Not like who his parents are or anything. Like if he was like a clone or something. It just explains that he grew up in the Jedi Temple, which makes sense. Tell me what you think of that in the chat of Grogu's backstory. And are you going to call him Grogu, or are you going to just keep calling him Baby Yoda? Like I'm sure many people will. Ahsoka, that's a big one in this episode. Um, I think, okay, when I first saw her, I thought she was just a little bit off, but upon rewatching it and seeing her later in the episode, just the more I see her, the more comfortable I get with an Ahsoka in live action. Her head montrals, like the top parts, are a little bit short. I think they're just curved back a bit too much. Not curved, but like they're going backwards. It makes them appear even shorter. Um, and then she has like little scratches in her horns, which I don't know if those were necessary. You don't see them in um, any of like in Rebels or Clone Wars, but it kind of makes sense. Maybe it didn't look good and they added those, and it was like, oh, it's a little tiny detail that makes it seem more lived in, more realistic. Which this show is getting really good. Like that's one of the things that the prequels are criticized for is their all their stuff is just too smooth, it's too perfect. Whereas in the original trilogy and in the Mandalorian, everything is all like dirty and it's got like it's not perfect, so it looks like people actually live there. Um, what else? Yeah, so then there's Mando. He's just being Mando in this episode. Again, just like last episode, he's just being a cool Mandalorian guy. He does fight Ahsoka, which I thought was awesome. And that's what I'm going to talk about now is the choreography. And this is especially important to me because I love like Star Wars duels, like lightsaber fights, blaster fights. And it's not even just Star Wars. I just like that kind of combat. But it was really good. With an important character like Ahsoka, and one whose fighting style is much easier to like simulate in like animation than to act out, because like it's easier to make someone seem realistic but have superpowers than to act like you have superpowers. I would think so. I've never done either of them, but from what I can tell from like the clone, like can you imagine Darth Sidious versus Maul and Savage Opress in live action? That would be so hard to do, but it works in animation. And I think Ahsoka's lightsaber fighting style is one that works especially well in animation, but they did a really good job with that in this episode. She's very agile, very quick. I think she's a little bit more measured than before, but that makes sense because she's older. You would expect that. It's like it's not such a stark difference that it's like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. It's a subtle enough difference that it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. She's just a little bit older, and it's live action, so you can give him a little slack. So yeah, the original fight with the fog, where she's like blending into that, was super awesome, and I think she's maybe using the Force on the fog a little bit, because it does seem to kind of like cloak around her sometimes. It's not like obvious that that's what's happening, but I think if you rewatch it, it kind of looks like that a little bit, which is super awesome. It's a very subtle use of the Force and something that I think comes with experience, which obviously Ahsoka has, which is why she outranks Rex. Yeah, then there's obviously Ahsoka versus Mando, which one interesting thing about Mando and his like whole strategy to take out or to find a Jedi is he doesn't bring his jetpack, which is interesting because you would think if you want to locate something, you would want the mobility and speed that comes with a jetpack. And if you're fighting a Jedi who wields lightsabers, you would definitely want that. But then again, he's never met a Jedi, so he doesn't know what to expect from them. So it's just kind of interesting that he doesn't bring his jetpack. What else is there? Yeah, okay. Mando versus Ahsoka. That fight was so cool. Beskar deflecting lightsabers. I don't know. I don't think that was canonized before, but now it's definitely canon. It's definitely a thing you can do. Yeah. And then just the white lightsabers. He like cocooned himself in his armor, then shot it with a flamethrower. She blocked it with her cloak, and then he got her wrapped up, which I was kind of surprised by. But I guess it kind of makes sense. Like, what is she going to do? I guess she could use the Force or kick him or something, but she just didn't, and that's totally fine. He kind of got lucky. But then Ahsoka, of course, just jumps over a log and picks him up. He has to, like, drop himself, but by then Ahsoka could have got him. So I think it's pretty clear Ahsoka was like the better warrior, but Mando is very skilled, and because of his armor, he put up a pretty good fight, which I thought was super cool. Like if you had told me, oh, Mando is going to just about tie with Ahsoka, I'd be like, what? But then upon further inspection of this fight, you can see that it's not so much Mando is as skilled as Ahsoka as his armor counters her strategy very well. Which Ahsoka has fought Mandalorians like once, um, in that episode with Lux Bonteri. Um, I guess she probably fought them in the Siege of Mandalore. Um, did she? I don't remember her actually. I think she just kicked a bunch. I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, um, I guess she probably should have used different tactics, but I guess that's all I can say because that fight was awesome. Other than that, like little thing where she doesn't kick him or use the force, um, which would have been much more effective than her lightsabers because it has more weight behind it. Um, the fight was so cool. I love how she jumped over the log or the branch and it pulled him up. Very clever. But then, yeah, okay, yeah. So then she attacks the city, which that whole choreography where she jumps up on the wall and then slashes apart a bunch of guards and even lets one escape because he's disarmed. I thought that was a cool touch. That entire segment was cool. And then they all like gather together and she walks out, throws out the pauldron. That was cool. Then even her running away and hunting down the guards one by one was also awesome. I feel like when she turned on both her lightsabers and like pulled them apart, kind of like she did, I think it's the finale of season 2. You probably know what scene I'm talking about. If you don't, leave it in the chat and I'll explain more fully. I feel like that was a little bit slow. Like she should have pulled them apart faster. And she was like looking straight at the camera. It seemed almost like a fourth wall break, which I didn't like. But other than that, it was super cool. That those like droids, like it's cool to see them like shooting and like being tough, but I especially like when they showed their agility. So like when he grabbed onto the edge of the roof and like rolled up, that was cool. They're like ninja droids. But then after that, when like the finale fight, Mando versus like the gunslinger guy, that was cool. He probably could have just shot him sooner, but maybe not. I mean, he does have Beskar, but what was he gonna do? Like shoot him and then just wait? It's much cooler if he shoots him at the end. And he's like, "Ha! I'm about to get him." Pulls out his blaster, but then Mando, of course, is always ready, so he gets shot. That was cool. But Ahsoka versus the Magistrate, I didn't like that fight. Like, yeah, I didn't really like that fight at all. I liked the beginning up until the point where they take like 2 steps too close, have like super weak stances, and they're holding the spear in like one hand in the middle of the shaft. It's all wrong. I don't like it. So during most of the fight, or yeah, at the beginning, they've got everything I mentioned. They're too close, and they're that for the entire fight. They're like standing right next to each other. They've got kind of weak stances at first and weak stances at the end. Like the Magistrate is like standing at attention, and Ahsoka's like also standing very rigid. Like their feet cannot be very far apart. And then the spear fighting, that's the most bothering to me, because okay, staffs are cool. If that had been like a Beskar staff or like had a double-bladed Beskar weapon, there's a weapon like that in Legends that like Zabraks used to use. If they had just taken that and made it like a Mandalorian ancient weapon, that would have been awesome. So it's like instead of a spear, it's like a double sword. That'd be super cool. But it's a spear. So I expected her to use it like a spear, but she's like twirling it around and using both ends, lots of like slashes, which is not at all how the best way to use a spear. I don't know what they were thinking. Yeah. I just didn't like how they used the spear as a staff. But other than that, this episode is really really good. And again, this is why it's like third, fourth, for third or fourth favorite episode. Just a really good episode. Um, yeah. Other than the choreography of that last fight. Oh, another thing I didn't really like that much is the music. It was good most of the time, and the two times they played Ahsoka's theme was super cool. Um, I don't know about the instrumentation of Ahsoka's theme. I wish it had more, like depth and gravitas to it rather than just like a flute or whatever it was. Um, but it was cool. It's a cool nod. I love hearing that theme just throughout canon. But I don't know, like it's like that like recorder music or flute music at the very end. What like when Mando's like saying goodbye to, or about to say goodbye to Baby Yoda, or Grogu. Um, I don't know. I just it didn't. I don't get what that was trying to do. It kind of made me a little bit uncomfortable. I'm like, what? Why is this music here? I don't know. What did you think of that music? Is that like, did you get like the emotions that music was trying to convey? There was a lot of Mandalorian theme in it, but the instrumentation was just not very serious. It was very lighthearted, which didn't really fit the scene in my opinion. I don't know. Um, Other than that, there's two amazing like plot reveals. Um, so this all has been like the setting, the characters, the choreography. Um, but now we get to the plot, and that the two major plot reveals, um, are Thrawn and Tython. So, oh, before I move on to the plot, the one thing I want to mention about like character development, not so much development, um, when Ahsoka references Anakin, which is like, she's talking about how Grogu has an attachment to Mando, and she's seen what it does to the best of them, referring to Anakin, of course, and showing that she's she's not like some weird gray Jedi. She is a light side user, um, and she still has respect and admiration for Anakin, even though he turned to the dark side. She like separates the two in her head, um, and it's just a chilling moment to hear her mention that, especially the line, what is it? It's to the best of us. Um, Super chilling. But onto the plot. So Thrawn, I don't know if that's going to be like a thing in the Mandalorian, or if that's going to be a thing in like an Ahsoka series or a Thrawn and Ezra series. There's a lot of things Thrawn could be doing, and a lot of reasons Ahsoka could be hunting him down. The obvious one is Thrawn is with the Empire, and Ahsoka is with the rebels, so they fight. But I think it's more than that. I think Ahsoka at this point is looking for Ezra, and she knows Ezra is with Thrawn, and she can't find any leads for Ezra, but she can find some leads to Thrawn, and so she's following those. One of those is the magistrate. So she gets her to try and give her information about where Thrawn is, and also that she can find Ezra. And one thing this could be is either Sabine is somewhere like doing something else to find Ezra, or this is before the conclusion to Rebels, and like Ahsoka is going to realize that she needs Sabine Wren to help her find Ezra, which would be super cool. I can't wait till they tell that story and tell the story of Ezra and Thrawn, and Ahsoka and Sabine. That's like the story that I'm looking forward to most at this point. Can't wait till they say that or tell that story. And they could do it in like an Ahsoka show or a Thrawn and Ezra show. Who knows? But another option is Thrawn is like starting to lead the Empire, because this is after what is it, the Aftermath trilogy. So he could like lead the remnants of the Empire that didn't become the First Order, and like cause a lot of problems for the New Republic because he's Thrawn, and that'd be very similar to the original Thrawn books, which I haven't read, but I know the plot is something like Thrawn is the bad guy and he's leading the remnants of the Empire against the New Republic that Han, Luke, and Leia started. So yeah, that's some options for what Thrawn could be doing. Another cool thing they introduced in this episode was Tython. If you don't know, Tython is from the very old Republic. It's like it's before the Jedi. There's a order of sorcerers called Jedi, they wield both the light side and the dark, like at the same time. They're very gray Jedi. I don't know if they have. Yeah, they're very gray. They probably have. I haven't actually read the comics, but I know a little bit about them. Just I don't remember where. But I used to love Grey Jedi, and so I heard of Tython through that. Anyways, if like a Jedi was going too far to the dark side, they would send them up to the one moon called Ashla, where they would, spend some time in the light side. And if they were getting too much towards the light side, which I would argue is not a thing. Well, is it? It's not a thing. They would send them towards the other moon called Bogan. And this is, these moons have been referenced by the Bendu. He says he's not Ashla or Bogan, he's the one in the middle. And yeah, he talks about that. And then Ahsoka, I think it's in her book, the Ahsoka book, she calls herself Ashla. Because she doesn't want to be found by the Empire, so she uses a fake name and she chooses Ashla. I don't know if she knows the significance of that, and I don't really remember for sure, but I know Ahsoka used Ashla sometime. Another time they used Ashla is the, what is it called? I forget the species name, but it's Zeb's species. Oh, the Lasat. In that Rebels episode where the Lasat, Grandma and Kid and Zeb all go to the new Lasat homeworld, through the star cluster thing, and they use the electric staff. They mention the Ashla as the equivalent of the Force. So I think the Ashla. Yeah, so the Ashla would be the Force, and then Bogan would be the dark side, or you could say they just over the years they started interpreting Ashla as the Force instead of Ashla and Bogan as the Force, depending on your point of view, whether you think the dark side and the Force are the same thing. Which I guess is just words, so I find the distinction to be a good one, but who knows? It's just words. So yeah, when they get to Tython, though, Baby Yoda is going to have two options. Well, really, he's going to have 6 options. He's going to, choose between 2 of them, but then if he chooses one, there's, 4 other options, or 5 options. So, one option is he gets there, and he calls Ezra Bridger to him. Which would be cool. And one note about that is Ahsoka could be, because she's searching for Ezra at this point, probably. I mean, it's not confirmed, but I would assume that's what she's doing. So if she sent Baby Yoda to Tython, and then Grogu, or Baby Yoda, called Ezra, she could track Mando and get Ezra there. Another option is Cal Kestis, and this is probably my least favorite one, because, I don't know, I just feel like he would die in, Jedi Fallen Order 2 or something. He got too close to Vader to survive, in my opinion. He could go on to be a super cool character. But it's not confirmed that he survives, and I just feel like he would die for whatever reason. I don't really know why, but that's just my thought on that. Another option is Luke Skywalker, and this is a big one, but I think it's a bit too early in the show for them to bring out Luke Skywalker. The other problem with that is then Grogu would go to Luke's Jedi Temple, which I don't really want, because one, you would think that we would have heard of that in some comic or, I don't know. You'd think he would be super important, but he would probably be dead then. He would get killed by Kylo, which Kylo's like accidentally killing people or something. I haven't actually read the comic, but like he like accidentally blows up the temple, and then some Jedi from the temple attack him, and he kills them, I think. But the child would have been killed by an accidental lightning blast, which is super dumb. Another option is that the Jedi that comes to find him is just some new Jedi that we've never heard of, like Thrika Lu or something. I don't know. Thrika Lu, who wields a green lightsaber and is especially good at force jumps. Wow, cool. I don't know. Just some new Jedi. A fifth option that we could have is a Jedi that we know of, but we didn't know survived Order 66. So like Quinlan Voss. Who else is there? Deepa Baba died. I don't know. There's a lot of Jedi. Did Chpt die in canon? I know there's a deleted scene. Two deleted scenes, and she dies in The Force Unleashed. But I think she's still alive, so Chpt could be one. I thought of another option. Or remembered, because someone had mentioned this another time, is what if a Sith comes and finds Baby Yoda? Which would be super interesting and would push Grogu even further down the dark side. I don't know, that would be super cool, super interesting. I don't know if I would want that, but it all depends on the execution, right? Like, yeah. But another option that I think a lot of people will forget is that he just doesn't call anybody. He decides not to. Because Ahsoka says, well, when you get to Tython, it will be Grogu's choice as to whether he calls the Jedi or doesn't. And if he doesn't, then he's going to become a Mandalorian, which I think would be awesome. It might be a little bit silly to see like a 2-foot-tall Mandalorian, but I mean, imagine. I would just think it's super cool. So that's my thoughts on Chapter 13. A very good episode. Lots of ramifications for the plot. The choreography was great. They did Ahsoka very well. They could have done that final fight between Ahsoka and the Magistrate a lot better. But oh well, not everything can be perfect. So let's move on to the next segment, which is the top 10 Force abilities. Or just a bunch of cool ones, if you don't want to take the time to list your top 10. So tell me in the chat, what are your favorite Force abilities? What are the most powerful? What are the coolest? The most interesting? Tell me your thoughts in the chat or in the comments if you're watching the rebroadcast. So, my 10th favorite one, and this probably changes even more than my favorite characters. I don't know. I thought this list is pretty cool, but there are a lot of Force powers, and they're all kind of even. I think the combination of them is what makes the Force really cool. But my 10th favorite is the Mind Trick. It's just a cool power. It leads to some interesting humor. I don't know. I think the thing I like most about it is, well, one, you're manipulating like someone's thoughts. That's kind of interesting. But two, it's every time someone uses it, they like wave their hand and they get like this twinkle in their eye, and they use this like weird voice like, you will hit the like button, you will subscribe, wink wink. It's, I don't know, it's just super cool to see. And it's also funny to see people like fail at it, like their first time. Like, I don't know if Ahsoka ever does, but I know Ezra tries it and fails at least once, and it's great for like testing someone's abilities. And of course Rey fails at it too. You know, her first 3 tries, or is it 2 tries? Whatever. But then she succeeds. And then the next one, my 9th favorite force power is the mind probe. Again, very similar to the mind trick. It's a mental thing. And this, like, we first saw this in The Force Awakens, and I thought it was super cool. Like, holding out your hand and just, like, a battle of wills. It's a super cool, like, power. Like, it doesn't matter what magic system or what exactly you're doing, but just the battle of the two wills is a very cool thing to see, especially in books, but it works in, like, movies and TV shows also. And yeah, and just getting information from them, very useful, very cool looking, takes a lot of power depending on who you're mind probing. Yeah. Number 8 is telekinesis. And this one is not including stuff like force push and force choke. You know, actually, I'm going to move number 8 to 7. And 7 to 8. 7 was force choke, and that's now 8. So force choke, not quite as cool as telekinesis. There's just not as much you can do with it. Like with telekinesis, you can throw Rex off of giant walls, the clone trooper. You can lift up X-Wings. You can throw Senate pods at your little green friend. There's just a lot of things you can do with telekinesis, and that's why I like telekinesis, is there's just so much you can do. Force choke, on the other hand, is one specific application of telekinesis, and that is, it's a very dark side power, because you're reaching out and grabbing someone's throat. Like, it's not inherently, like, telekinesis, the act of, like, reaching out and grabbing someone is not evil, but when you grab someone's throat, it, like, shows you're intending to kill. That's, like, yeah, I don't know. That's why I like force choke. So force choke is number 8. Telekinesis is number 7. Number 6 is beast control. I've always liked beast control. It's just awesome to have, like, an army of beasts behind you. So Ezra, super awesome character. He's a cool character, especially when he uses his beast control, which is like his power. Hang on just a second. Okay. Yeah, beast control. So with the what I don't remember what they're called. They go to that, like, asteroid thing and there's, like, those cat-like monsters that hang out in the shade. Wait a minute. Are those the ones as in Mandalorian Chapter 9? I'm gonna check that, like, after this stream. See the similarities and stuff. But anyways, in their, like, some battle against the Inquisitor, he throws all these, like, vicious monsters at him, and then eventually, when all seems lost, he reaches out and connects with this giant one, which just about kills the Inquisitor. Super cool scene, and really, this is the first time we saw Ezra's affinity for beast control, and that beast control ability goes all the way up until the very end when he defeats Thrawn with space whales, which is so awesome. I love it. I feel like most people don't like space whales that much because they defeated Thrawn, which is, I usually don't like things that defeat Thrawn, but I'm gonna forgive space whales for defeating Thrawn because it's so unexpected and such an Ezra thing to do. It's great for character, it's great for just logic, and it's great for the plot because you kind of need Thrawn out of the way. Otherwise, how is episode 4, 5, and even 6 gonna happen? Like, Thrawn would just destroy the rebels, and those TIE defenders would. Yeah, like if the first Death Star blew up, and Thrawn was there championing the TIE defender, Admiral Yularen, or ISB officer Yularen, or whatever, and he gets, like, Vader onto the TIE defender project. You got all these important people behind it. That that could be pretty cool. Um, it'd be pretty cool for the Empire, but not so cool for the rebels who would be dead. Um, because TIE defenders, man, those were the future of the Empire. Um, what was I talking about? I was talking about force powers and beast control. So yeah, anyways, that's why I like beast control. It's so cool to have just like t- mind tricks. They're super cool. You can influence weak minds. The problem with them is that you can only influence like one thought of like one person at a time. Maybe like half a dozen people if you're really strong. Um, but to be able to control a whole bunch of things all at once, you need beast control, which is super cool. Number 5 is another awesome power called psychometry, and this is like Quinlan Voss and Cal Kestis and possibly Rey. Maybe, I don't know. She did have a vision when she touched that Skywalker lightsaber, but for sure Quinlan Voss and Cal Kestis have psychometry, and that's the ability where you touch an object and you can like feel its history through the Force. It's just a very cool power, and one awesome thing about it is, unlike most other powers, not every Force sensitive can learn it. So Quinlan Voss and Cal Kestis are some of the two of like a very small amount of people who can have it. Like Yoda doesn't have it, Windu doesn't have it, Darth Sidious doesn't have it. So it's just someone who has psychometry is um what's the word, instantly more interesting because they have this very unique power. Number 4 is super basic but super awesome. It's a force push. Like there are not many things cooler than just like thrusting out your hand and imagining something flying back. It's just so cool. Yeah, I don't know. There's not much to say about it. It's just an awesome feeling. Number 3, and this one is another very simple one. One of the first powers we see. What is the first power we see? It's a mind trick. Well, first power that you would notice is a mind trick. But in the very first movie, like in theaters, and then in episode 1 as well, they mention it both times. To very important to the plot. It's Jedi reflexes. So Luke blows up the Death Star. Anakin can pod race. He's a decent pilot. He doesn't use his piloting skills to beat the Trade Federation. He just kind of gets lucky. But he is a pretty good pilot, and he demonstrates this especially with his pod racing. Yeah, so heightened reflexes are super cool. They'd be super useful too. And they show up like everywhere. In the Thrawn alliances, they're a huge thing. Like the Skywalkers, like the just Skywalkers, not the Jedi Skywalkers. That's like one of their only abilities is their heightened reflexes. Which is kind of interesting. I kind of want to know more about why the Skywalkers are the way that they are. Which, if you haven't read the Thrawn trilogy, the canon one, and probably the Legends one too, although I haven't read that one. If you haven't read the Thrawn trilogy and Thrawn Ascendancy, you should totally just check those out and read those. They're super cool. Yeah, heightened reflexes are a super cool power. Another awesome power, and my second favorite one right now, is Force Lightning. Just like Force Push, it's just an awesome looking power. Again, it's the thrusting out of the hand and then energy bursts out of it. But this time, instead of just like stuff moving, wow, it's lightning out of your fingertips. It's just super awesome. One of the coolest powers, as I'm sure Darth Sidious and Count Dooku and Snoke and just a whole bunch of Sith agree. It's so awesome. There's not many practical applications for it outside of combat, but it's a pretty powerful ability. it's kind of negated by lightsabers, but even then, the main reason I like it is it just looks awesome. Um, so yeah, Force Lightning, super cool ability. What do you think of Force Lightning? Um, my favorite Force power, and I might have switched it, but let's just go with it. My favorite Force power, just by a little bit, is Force Augmentation, which is a very, it's a two-word way to say Force Speed, Force Jump, Force Strength, Force Endurance, just all the strengthening of, your physicality that the Force grants. So in Jedi lightsaber duel, and they're moving really fast, that's Force Augmentation. When Luke is, equaling the strength of Vader's cybernetic suit, that's Force Augmentation. When Ahsoka is doing front flips, and, kicking people in the face, that's Force Augmentation. Even when, Obi-Wan is jumping up, during Duel of the Fates, I don't know, for some reason that scene sticks out to me. When he's jumping up, then that's Force Jump. It's Force Augmentation. Which, tell me in the chat if there is a better word for that. But I think, because augmentation is kind of vague. It's like you're augmenting your physical abilities, yes. But what if you're just augmenting your sight? That's not in Force Augmentation. What if you're augmenting your lightsaber ability? Well, I suppose you are. But Force Augmentation is kind of a clumsy word. So tell me in the chat if there's a better one. But I think that's a good word to describe what Force Augmentation is referring to. So with that, that's my top 10 Force abilities. Tell me what yours are in the chat. Tell me in the comments too. If you don't want to take the time to list out a top 10, just tell me a bunch of cool ones that you like. But with that out of the way, let's move on to how powerful is Ahsoka Tano. Short answer, pretty powerful. But I'm gonna kind of describe her power. And not just at the end of her life or at her most powerful. I'm going to describe her throughout the Clone Wars, Rebels, and up into the Mandalorian. So in Season 1, I think, in Season 1, she is very gifted. I haven't seen the Clone Wars movie recently, but in the episode where Anakin loses R2-D2 and has to use that replacement droid, she battles Grievous, which she doesn't win. But she doesn't die. She is basically, it's not so much that she fights Grievous as she escapes a duel with Grievous. She survives, which is very impressive. But then for a more accurate description of her skill, because she's just running away from Grievous when she battles Ventress. And that's in that episode where Newt Gunray is captured and Luminara Unduli and Ahsoka are guarding Newt Gunray, and then Ventress attacks. She doesn't beat Ventress. Ventress is clearly the better duelist, but she's not too far behind, and that's pretty impressive. Then later, Luminara loses to Ventress. It's a pretty close fight, but Ventress is more tenacious and creative, I would say. But then Ahsoka shows up, and then Ventress is just she can't get past their defenses. She manages to run away pretty effectively, but Ahsoka being there, helping Luminara, made Ventress. She was forced to run away. Basically, she couldn't engage in combat, even though they couldn't catch her. But then in Season 2, she gets quite a bit better. Right, okay. I wrote down something I'm reading from my notes to kind of remind me of everything. And I was looking at something and I was like, wait, what did I write? I couldn't quite read my handwriting. Anyways, Season 2 is the two highlights of that, from what I could tell, or in my opinion, is the Battle of Geonosis, the second one that is, and her duel with Barriss when Barriss is infected with the Geonosian like zombie worm thing. So in the Battle of Geonosis, she keeps up with Anakin pretty well, and in fact she beats him in their like game of who can destroy more battle droids. She destroys 60 battle droids in that battle, and Anakin destroys 55. And Ki-Adi-Mundi beats them both with 65. It's it's very impressive to defeat Anakin in a like race to kill the most droids. Even though she probably only did that like once, still very impressive. Especially for one her age. But then later, after that, she's like bringing. I don't remember what the mission is supposed to be, but it pretty much becomes don't die to the Geonosian zombie worms that infect the clone troopers on her ship. And it's Ahsoka, Barriss, and a bunch of clone troopers. And Barriss gets infected, and that's when Ahsoka is really in trouble. She battles Barriss. Barriss and Ahsoka were about even in like lightsaber combat. Barriss did use the Force a bit more and a bit more effectively. She had a few Force pushes that knocked Ahsoka off her feet, but Ahsoka would always be able to like land a kick that would knock Barriss back and allow her to escape. So at that point, she was better than Barriss, which I'll get to her second fight with Barriss later. Season 3, the main one in this one is the Citadel arc. This is where she gets her second, not where she gets it. This is, I don't know if the first time, but in this season is when she gets her second lightsaber blade, the Shoto one, short one. And she like sneaks into the mission, like even though she's not supposed to be there. And she keeps up pretty well. She, what does she do? She defends Master Peel pretty well against the crab droids. There's like, 3 or 4 of them. And she takes out like 1 or 2, and Master Peel takes out the rest. But then like a dog thing that they were using, the Separatists, takes out Master Peel. And yeah, if you haven't seen it, it's a cool arc. And she kind of just shows her power there. Not any like super notable feats, no like one-on-one duels, but it just shows that she's good on the battlefield. Season 4 has even less than season 3. It's pretty much just and this is like from a it's not an in-depth look through. I didn't like watch every episode to prepare for this. I just watched ones that I remembered had Ahsoka fighting in them. Season 4 is pretty light on Ahsoka. It's got pretty much just the Mon Cala arc where the Mon Cala and the Quarren are fighting, and the Separatists are backing the Quarren, and the Republic and the Gungans are backing the Mon Cala. She doesn't do anything super special in that. She just, again, shows her awareness and her skill with the lightsabers. Season 5. So in Season 1, she escaped Grievous. But in Season 5, she battles Grievous again, and this is on Florum, with the arc where the Padawans get their lightsaber crystals, and then get captured by pirates, and then they escape, and free Ahsoka as well. Anyways, she escapes Grievous, and she did not defeat Grievous. Many people think, like, look at the battle, and they're like, oh, she fought Grievous. But she was mostly running away during that fight. It's still very impressive. Grievous is a known and very dangerous Jedi killer, and she managed to hold him off for quite a while, and then even escape. So that was impressive. That's a very big step up from her last duel with Grievous, where she was just running away the entire fight. But then also in Season 5, this is when she is expelled from the Jedi Order, and she fights Barriss again, and she loses pretty badly. The thing with that, though, is I don't think that Ahsoka was a worse duelist than Barriss. Even though she lost, I think the reason she lost is because she thought she was battling Ventress. So she was expecting a certain style. she had fought adventures before. She like kind of knew a little bit of what to expect. But then Barris is fighting, so it's a completely different style. Even though the like blades were the same and the physicality was pretty close, just the style was different than what she expected. So, yeah, I think that's the reason she lost so badly to Barris. Although I do think it's definitely possible that Barris passed her in skill, since their duel in season 2. Although their duel in season 2, Barris could have been weakened due to the Geonosian like brain worm or whatever. Anyways, it's she loses pretty badly, but I think that's because she's fighting someone who is disguised as someone else. So what do you think about that? Do you think Barris is just that much better, or what do you think of all this? How powerful do you think Ahsoka is through her career as a Jedi? Season 6, Ahsoka is not in it. She left the Order, and she's not coming back until season 7, where she comes back in episode 9, 10, 11, and 12, and some of the greatest Star Wars ever. And she battles Maul, which... Hang on. Yeah, okay. She battles Maul, which is... Maul is very skilled, but in this time, he's not at his best. He was expecting Obi-Wan and Anakin to show up. And that was like his whole plan, is to get them to show up, kill Anakin with his Mandalorians, kill Obi-Wan himself. I think it's my first stream that I started with this format. I know I did a stream where I talked about Maul's plan during the Siege of Mandalore. So check that out if you want my thoughts about what he was trying to do. But anyways, after his initial plan, he came up with Plan B, which was to turn Ahsoka to his side so that together they could destroy Sidious and kill Obi-Wan probably. Although he might not have expected her to help him with killing Kenobi for a while. Anyways, his whole plan was for her to turn. But when she fights him, that's not part of his plan. He's a little bit thrown off. But beyond that, the main reason he lost is overconfidence. Ahsoka, to him, is just... Stop. My phone keeps buzzing. Ahsoka, to him, is just a Padawan. She's no longer a Jedi. Which, to that, Ahsoka responds, well, you're only half a Sith. Which is funny on so many levels. But, anyways. Ahsoka is underrated, and this is it's the same reason Obi-Wan beat Maul in The Phantom Menace. But regardless of that, it is still very impressive that Ahsoka was able to beat Maul. Well, kind of. Just like Obi-Wan, she got disarmed and she was in a very bad position, and then she ended up beating him despite that. So she kind of loses to Maul, but then ends up Maul doesn't finish her off and then ends up getting killed because of it. Although, previously in the fight, she gets disarmed, one of her blades, and then they get in that blade lock, and then she leans back and pushes him out the window. You could say she defeated him then. But then again, Maul's pretty tough. If there was a fight to the death, Maul would probably just jump back in and get back at it. So yeah, in that fight, there is a lot more... It's not a fight to the death. It's not one-on-one who's going to kill the other one first. Both of them have, an agenda to accomplish. Maul wants to turn Ahsoka to the dark side and escape if he can't. Ahsoka wants to capture Maul and kill him if he can't. So yeah, very impressive, but it's not like she's way better than Maul. Although I think you could say that she is about as skilled as him by the time of Rebels, which is a great segue into Ahsoka during Rebels. Unlike in the Clone Wars, she's only in Rebels for really one season. She's there in season 4, but not really. She gets pulled out of the portal and then runs away from Sidious for a while. But in that season, she has 2 awesome fights. The first one is Ahsoka versus the 2 Inquisitors. Kanan and Ezra and Cal Kestis and a whole bunch of other Jedi were able to take on one, and they'd maybe beat them, maybe they'd lose. But Ahsoka comes out and she takes on two at once, and she doesn't pretty easily beat them, but they didn't really have much of a chance of beating her, especially that big guy, the fifth brother. He was kind of pathetic. Um, I think it's the second sister, or it might be the seventh sister, whichever the female one in Rebels, um, is always very impressive to me. Like those little drones, they're awesome. Like you get in a blade lock, have a drone go after them, they're defenseless. It's kind of like the Cavalry Runs crossguards. But they have like spying usages. Um, yeah, super useful. But beyond that, her fighting skills are also very useful. Um, Useful is the wrong word. Her fighting skills are also very impressive. And Ahsoka takes on her and the fifth brother at once. Which the fifth brother, his main advantage is strength, which of course Ahsoka just easily subverts. However, one person's strength who she can't subvert is Darth Vader's. She fights Vader in the finale of season 2 of Rebels. It's so awesome. Not just the choreography, but the idea of Ahsoka, Anakin's former apprentice, fighting him as Vader, and really just failing to turn him, and being forced to try and kill him is just a great fight to see. And some people say like Ahsoka's as good as Vader, she was fighting him, but I have always seen it as Vader was clearly the dominant warrior in that battle. He was able to use his like skill and his reflexes to basically use his strength. Like the fifth brother, he was stronger than Ahsoka, but he couldn't use his strength because Ahsoka would dodge around his attacks. But Vader was able to pin her down and crush her. It took a while. Ahsoka's no slouch. She was able to block his blades once, showing she can at least not match his strength. She can at least like block one of his attacks. He's not so overwhelmingly strong. But she did eventually succumb to his strength, kind of, because Ezra rescued her. I do think she would have died if Ezra hadn't gone there, so she's not as powerful as Vader, but she's still very clearly very powerful. And it's kind of a redundant sentence, but she's clearly very powerful. And now we get on to Ahsoka during the Mandalorian. This is it's a bigger transition. It's a difficult transition. It's hard to like compare her to her past selves because it's going into live action. The movement is different. You obviously can't do quite as much as you could before, so the acrobatics is toned down. There's like in that final battle, there's like one flip. Whereas if they had animated that, it would probably been like 3 or 4 flips. Yeah, so it's a bit different, but I think she's only slightly better. Maybe I think she's more subtle with her skills now. For example, at the beginning when she's hiding into the mist, and personally I think she's using the Force to like move around the mist to better cloak herself, which is a very subtle use of the Force, which would, yeah. But even if she's just like turning off her lightsabers and blending in, it's still a more subtle version of her skills. And then later, when she like uses the Force to disarm a guy while taking out another guy, she like Force pulls the guy's blaster and knocks the other guy in the head with it. It's not so much subtle as it is just efficient use of the Force. I do think she could have used the Force more, especially if they were trying to make her an older and more wise and even more powerful version of Ahsoka. And you could do that in live action pretty easily. But I mean, it's fine that she's just a little bit of a step up in subtlety from her past, from her time in Rebels. Yeah. So, in terms of like compared to other characters, I would say at the time of Rebels, she is still below Vader, probably below Windu and Dooku as well, but pretty close to that level. And depending on when the flash or the what is it, the epilogue to Rebels is, she could be about that level at that time. If it's before, obviously, probably not. But if it's after, she could totally like have skilled up her force powers to the point where she could match Vader, Windu, and Dooku and that kind of people. I do think she at that point she is more skilled than Obi-Wan. Um, I think Obi-Wan would put up a great fight, and it'd probably be a draw, unless it was like a one-on-one fight to the death situation. But I think Ahsoka would be the better warrior, the more dominant, definitely the more dominant warrior. Um, but just the one more likely to succeed in whatever goal the fight has, assuming it's an equal fight, with like equal motivation, equal goals. Anyways, the circumstances of the fight would probably determine the winner. Obi-Wan's just very tenacious, and it's super cool, his fights. But I think Ahsoka is a little bit between Obi-Wan and Vader, about that level. So that's how powerful I think Obi-Wan is. Let's recap. So, Mandalorian Chapter 13. It's a good episode. I loved seeing Ahsoka. They did her very well. That last fight between Ahsoka and the Magistrate was not good. In my opinion, it was weak stances, standing too close together. I don't know. The other thing about that fight is Ahsoka totally should have beaten the Magistrate. Like, way easier than that. Like, if the Magistrate was force sensitive, sure. But we don't really have any indication of that. And Ahsoka didn't use the Force at all in that fight. Like, she could have ended it with a Force push into the water. Boom, disarmed. Where's Thrawn? Wahaha. Yeah. That fight could have been better. But other than that, that fight was great. Then I went over some of my favorite Force abilities, some of the best: Force Augmentation, Force Lightning, Heightened Reflexes, Force Push, Psychometry, all super cool. And then how powerful is Ahsoka Tano? Short answer, pretty powerful. Between like Windu and Obi-Wan, I would say. Possibly, I would say she's a little bit above the skill of Anakin during Revenge of the Sith at this point. Obviously, in terms of natural talent, Anakin would be better, but she's got a lot more experience, and experience outranks natural talent. So, with that, leave any questions, compliments, or critiques you have in the chat, or leave that in the comments. And with all that being said, may the Force be with you, always.